I didn't even recognize that I was a victim of trafficking.
They usually go after them for money. Some kind of extortion happens.
They're going to find the vulnerability that they can exploit, and they will do it.
All they look at people as is a commodity. It's a way to make money, and that's all they care about.
It is essentially modern-day slavery.
We're not victims. Yes, we was taken advantage of, but we survived.
As night falls, the bright lights of the city help us see in the dark, but they don't reveal everything that happens in the shadows. I'm Tammy Fields. Thank you for joining us for Justice for All Out of the Shadows. We're above downtown Orlando, Florida, one of the most visited cities in the world, and a place local tourism leaders proclaim is the #1 destination in the United States. But not everyone who visits is here to go to a theme park or see a show. Orlando has the second largest number of human trafficking cases in the Sunshine State. Florida has the third highest number of calls into the National Trafficking Hotline. But human trafficking, it is a worldwide problem. It's really easy to think, though, this issue doesn't impact me, my family, or my friends. Well, the National Human Trafficking Hotline and law enforcement agencies across the country have a message.
Anybody can be trafficked. Age doesn't matter. Race, gender, doesn't matter. If you're vulnerable, you're vulnerable.
The numbers, they don't lie. Take a look at this heat map by the Polaris Project showing just how widespread this problem is. A study by the Global Slavery Index estimates that there are about 1 million people living in conditions of modern slavery today. Let's take a closer look at the statistics. The U.S. State Department estimates that there are more than 27 million victims worldwide at any given time. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children says it received nearly 16,000 child sex trafficking cyber tips in 2020. In 2022, that number increased by nearly 3,000. And since 2020, the number of tips for online enticement of children for sexual acts, well, it has more than doubled. There were 80,000 in 2022. Tonight, we are shining a light into the darkness. We're going to talk about solutions to this growing problem and empower you with the knowledge of what you can do to help. We'll also hear stories from survivors. We begin tonight with a student athlete. She was trafficked in college. She says she almost slipped through the cracks completely and is now fighting to ensure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Justice for All's Nicole Griffin has her story.
In these tiny grains of sand, Olivia Littleton feels seen.
It makes me feel not so alone, I think, when I can see myself among all of the other people that are impacted by this.
Each granule representing a victim of human trafficking who falls through the cracks.
It symbolizes all the survivors that never get connected to resources that people don't even recognize are in their community.
This is part of the Red Sand Project, a global movement Olivia helps host in Osceola County. It's personal for her, which is why she joins the walk to spread sand and awareness around the area.
Well, the walk is important because we want the red sand to not just be in front of a courthouse, but also to be where other people in the community are going to see it.
Olivia was in college when she was first trafficked.
When I was 19, I met a man online who was actually 15 years older than me. And through the course of a couple of weeks, he built a relationship with me. He started a conversation with me. He started separating me from my friends and family and support system, all the people that would have, seen the red flags. And then over the course of the next 2 years, that man eventually became my main abuser, my main trafficker.
While this was going on, Olivia says no one in her life knew.
It can look like the Taken story, right, in the movie, but more often it looks like my situation where I'm online, right, just looking for connection, being a normal teenager, and someone takes advantage of that vulnerability and just builds a relationship. And it's not like they kidnapped me, right? But instead they They ask me for photos and videos, and we're pushing boundaries to get increasingly more explicit photos and videos.
Eventually, the exploitation went from online to in person, but Olivia herself didn't recognize that she was being trafficked. She didn't look like a victim. Instead, she was a D1 athlete earning a degree, embarrassed and afraid to tell loved ones what was going on.
I didn't look like the girls on the posters in the bathroom of trafficking that are like mascara running down their face, like chained somewhere, right?
Once her trafficker was arrested for child pornography charges on a different case, she had the space to realize what was happening and get help.
I feel like a whole different person. I really do. I feel like the victim that I was is not the same woman that I am today.
Now, she spent the last 2.5 years pulling others just like her out of the cracks and into the light.
Life does go on, that there are people that want to support you. There's people like me. There's all kinds of Olivias all over the place, right? All kinds of advocates that are ready to help you when you want help. We're here for you.
One grain of sand at a time.
It's the feeling of almost like a full circle moment. Yeah, like I'm one tiny little grain of sand with so many other survivors, so many other people that are here to support survivors, and that my story didn't end just as a victim.
Nicole Griffin, Spectrum News.
Olivia says she didn't pursue charges against her trafficker because she felt justice was already being served and she needed to focus on getting through her own healing. But what about the criminals who are getting away with this? What is law enforcement doing to stop it? And what can you do?
Deal with it, we must. Our children's lives are at stake.
We're going to talk about that part of the story when Justice for All Out of the Shadows continues after this quick break. Welcome back to Justice for All Out of the Shadows. Law enforcement agencies are on the front lines of intercepting human traffickers and bringing them to justice. It is a difficult and often dangerous job, and the tools and methods the traffickers use, they are always evolving. So what can investigators do to stay one step ahead to save more lives? Well, joining us to talk more about that, Director Ron Stucker of the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
We know this is an ever-evolving crime. What do you want parents and guardians and grandparents to know?
You know, Tammy, one thing that we always tell people is probably everybody has been around a trafficking victim or a trafficker and just don't realize it. It's all around us all the time, in restaurants, at conventions, in hotels, wherever we may be. Each of us has probably been exposed to a trafficking victim at some time and just didn't realize it. And so it's important for them to understand the signs of a trafficking victim and to just be aware of what's going on and not be afraid to contact law enforcement if they think something is not right.
When people call in a tip, those tips are taken serious?
We follow up on every tip that we receive, particularly if a juvenile is involved. We respond immediately to that tip and see if we can locate a juvenile, identify who they are, if they're in danger, but not just juveniles. We follow up on every tip that we receive as best we can.
What keeps you up at night when it comes to human trafficking? It's a beautiful night. People are out enjoying themselves. What is in the back of your mind as someone that leads up NBI about the dangers that are out there in the shadows?
I think the thing that's always something that's always had an impression on me is the incredible prevalence of traffickers that are out there. The number of just true predators that are looking to exploit anyone that they can, whether it's a juvenile or it's an adult. People should not think that, oh, there's one or two human traffickers here in this area. I can't even guess how many traffickers there are in this area that are willing at any moment to identify a vulnerability and then exploit that vulnerability for their own gain.
But there is a way to fight back, right? And that's education.
One of the first things we do is education. We reach out to school systems, to, like I said, community groups, to hotel, motel, lodging associations, to make people aware, to help them understand the seriousness of this problem and how widespread it is. That's one of the first things, because as I said, a lot of our cases begin from a tip that somebody says, this just doesn't look right. And they call law enforcement. And so the education is very important. To us, servicing the victim is very important. I mentioned our victim advocates. Often, a human trafficking victim does not want to deal with law enforcement for a variety of reasons. We talk, maybe they're ashamed, they're embarrassed. But sometimes, particularly with an adult, a lot of times with juveniles too, they may have had negative interactions with law enforcement before. They may have a drug problem. They're committing acts of prostitution. They know they're committing crimes while they're being victimized. And there's that hesitation to open up to law enforcement. Our victim advocates will work with a victim for weeks, for months, sometimes for years, to get them into the right place in life. Sometimes that helps them come around and say, you know what? I need to cooperate with law enforcement now, because that trafficker needs to be stopped, because I got my life in the right place, but I don't want him to victimize somebody else. Because a trafficker, if we recover one victim, will simply go target another one if we don't put them in jail.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Director Stecker.
Sure.
We appreciate you talking to us.
Absolutely, it was my pleasure. Thanks for doing this story. It's very important.
Of course, thank you. According to the Department of Defense, 20% of human trafficking victims are children. Other trafficking experts argue that number may actually be much higher. So how in the world do you protect the children? Justice for All's Sandra Weathers introduces us to a woman who's using the strongest tool she has, education.
So hey y'all.
The amount of time it takes Jan Edwards to get these kids' attention.
What we do is we actually go out and we educate kids about human trafficking and online exploitation.
Is the same amount of time she says it takes for a predator to take advantage of them.
It takes less than 17 minutes for an online predator to entice a child to send an inappropriate picture.
It's a warning so important, Jan wishes she could put it on a projector screen and show it to every parent and every child.
How many of you have interacted with someone you don't know, it's okay, online, in a video game, on a social media, have met someone that you just, they're like, hey, and you're like, hey, back.
For now.
Yeah, we all have. I get them, right? I get, hey, beautiful. You're like, whatever.
She's starting with groups like this one at a Boys and Girls Club in Orlando.
Now imagine I'm 10 or 11, right? My mom just yelled at me. I just got a bad grade. Maybe my best friend just said something that made me mad. I feel like over here I need some sort of validation, and here's this semi-good looking guy that says, you're right, I'm the right man for you.
Jan's organization, called Paving the Way Foundation, educates children and adults about the dangers of human trafficking.
We are out to disrupt the cycle of child trafficking and online exploitation. We do that through educational programs. We go out into the community and talk to fifth graders, middle school, freshmen and seniors in high school, and their parents, and really, quite frankly, anyone that surrounds them.
She says their target age is typically children between 10 to 13 years old.
They'll start with, oh, I play soccer too. Oh, you like Roblox? I like Roblox too. You play GTA? I do too.
But predators can target anyone.
It's not an age thing. It's not a demographic thing, which is age. It's not socioeconomics, has nothing to do with finances, and has nothing to do with where you live. We are all vulnerable.
The warnings, simple but necessary.
That 17 minutes, it's, oh my gosh, you're pretty. Oh my gosh, you're handsome. Oh my gosh, we have this in common.
Topics like picture sharing.
Consider when someone's asking you for an inappropriate picture, it could literally alter your future.
Sextortion, where someone is tricked and then threatened with their own inappropriate images by a predator.
The rise of male sextortion, teen male sextortion, is up 322%. 322%, because these people overseas know our boys won't talk.
It's all being discussed with these young people.
I had a little girl at one of our schools that we were talking to. She was 13 and she got a message from a sugar daddy.
In hopes of educating and potentially saving a life.
Our children's lives are at stake, their future's at stake. And if we don't start to have these uncomfortable conversations with our children, we're going to see the continued growth of the epidemic of suicides, of self-harm, of alcohol use, and of drug use.
Unless programs like this can disrupt those 17 minutes.
Thank you, you guys. You guys were awesome. Yes. And we're complete.
Jan says it's not uncommon for a child in one of her courses to pull her to the side and tell her that based on what they just learned, they're currently being groomed online and had no idea. So it shows the education can be effective. The goal now is to get the information out to as many people as possible. Sandra Weathers, Spectrum News.
Sandra mentioned 17 minutes. Researchers found that's enough time for an online stranger to entice a child to send an inappropriate picture. You've now been watching this program for more than that amount of time. We did mention that parents will have to have some uncomfortable conversations, but how early is too early to have them?
You give a child a cell phone, it's like giving them the keys to your car and saying, be safe. It's not safe to give a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, keys to your car.
We'll show you the work that's already being done in schools to reach not just kids, but parents and teachers too. Justice for All, Out of the Shadows continues after the break. Welcome back to Justice for All, Out of the Shadows. In 2019, Florida became the first state in the nation to require child trafficking prevention to be taught in schools for every grade K through 12. To support this, the state's Department of Education's website has resources, training materials, links, and phone numbers. Individual school districts adjust the material to make it appropriate for each grade level. Justice for All's Erin Murray takes a closer look at some of that training.
Connie Rose walks along a green construction curtain that sits across from Jefferson High School in Tampa.
This is one of the places that I would have to meet men and the buyers, and I would have to have sex with them.
A hotel used to be built here, now gone. The memories, however, from her sex trafficking days are not.
And right behind us is my high school. That's where I went to high school many years ago, yes, right? But I was being trafficked out of my high school. Now, here's what I want to say about that before some of you go, oh, look what's going on in the high schools, right? It is happening. However, my trafficker was also my father.
Rose was sexually trafficked in the early 1970s. As you heard, her father was her main abuser and trafficker.
At 5 years old, I was in pornography, so it's being exploited and being sexually abused.
From 2 to 19 years old, in fact, Rose says she experienced this abuse and exploitation.
Here I do have clothes, but you can see the pictures are provocative. What he would do is he would have me pose in certain ways with my clothes on, and then I would have to do that same pose with my clothes off.
At 19, she got married and left home. That marriage saved her, but not her stepsisters.
For me, it's a driving force to do the work that I do. I have been working in the field since 1988 when my father was arrested for my stepsisters for being a pedophile.
Rose, in time, decided to dedicate her life to making sure this didn't happen to other young girls.
It's about you are an object, you are a commodity, and that you can make someone else money. I think we're going to...
For more than 40 years now, she has spread awareness, spearheading the organization Victims to Survivors US.
Here's the thing about human trafficking. Human trafficking doesn't care who you are.
We are seeing in the schools that sometimes it is peer-to-peer. So it could be that the trafficker and the victim are very close in age.
This is Hillsborough County School District's Human Trafficking Committee, and it really focuses on student safety online. In the crowd, just a sprinkling of parents listen, including Rachel Crescentini and her 11-year-old son, Rocco.
This is the reality we're living in now. I want him to feel comfortable in talking about these topics to me. I don't want him to hide anything from me. I don't want him to feel that he has to be secretive or ashamed.
Like almost every kid today, the internet, phones, online games, those are part of his world, and a common place traffickers begin to prey on their victims. It is why this panel shares warning signs and resources.
You know, he has so many friends online, but to me that's dangerous. There's nothing more important than your children's safety, and this is how people are getting to our kids nowadays.
Tonight was a good check-in for Rachel. Rocco was able to share how he knew a bit already about human trafficking and what it was.
And I was shocked. I mean, they're dealing with so much more stuff than we ever had to. They've got to be prepared.
Please just reach out to one of us and we're here for you.
More than ever, but feeling grateful, the school district and others are here to help. With photojournalist Tim Kenya, I'm Aaron Murray, Spectrum News.
Similar programs are in place across the country. In California, schools have to provide human trafficking education at least twice, once in middle school and once in high school. Outside of the classroom, several states require healthcare professionals to have the training. Ohio, for example, requires nurses to have at least 1 hour of education concerning trafficking victims. Florida and Texas extend that mandate to all healthcare professionals. And in New York, facilities are tasked with providing training. But doctors, nurses, and teachers aren't the only ones trained to spot signs of human trafficking. Coming up, we'll talk about steps both small businesses and big entities are taking and what you can also do to help. But first,
all they look at people as is a commodity. It's a way to make money, and that's all they care about.
new technology makes it possible for potential predators to be present in your home without you even knowing about it. We're going to talk about ways to keep them out. Justice for All, Out of the Shadows continues after the break. When you were little, did your parents tell you to watch out for strangers on the street? Stranger danger you likely heard them warn about? What about staying away from certain parts of town or avoiding dark alleys? Always travel in a group? Well, that is still good advice in 2024. Parents today, though, should be having additional conversations with their kids. Welcome back to Justice for All, Out of the Shadows. Today, there are more ways than ever for predators to reach potential victims. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's Cyber Tip Line is a centralized reporting system for online crimes targeting kids. Nearly all reports come from electronic service providers or web businesses. These reports could be of suspected child pornography, apparent online enticement, or alleged sex trafficking. The center says that the content of these reports varies greatly, and a high number of reports could indicate a dedicated effort by a platform to crack down on abusive material. There were 31.8 million reports in 2022, and more than 95% of them came from websites and apps frequently used by teenagers and children. I want you to take a closer look at this list. 2/3 of all reports were filed by Facebook, 21 million, followed by 5 million from Instagram, 2.1 million from Google, 1 million from WhatsApp, 500,000 from Snapchat, nearly 300,000 from TikTok, and 169,000 from Discord. While technology makes it easier to track online crimes, it also makes it easier for human traffickers to reach potential victims. Justice for All's Jeff Butera investigates how simple that first connection has become.
Tori Walters is looking at the device that changed her life forever. A man followed her on Instagram one day and messaged her. Nothing was ever the same again.
If I just didn't, even if I didn't accept that request, even if I didn't open that first message, my life would be different.
But she did open the message from a guy she would later call a Romeo pimp.
Romeo pimp, they get your insecurities and your vulnerabilities, and they make you fall in love with them.
At first, Tori said he was romantic, treated her like a girlfriend. And she was a recovering drug addict, estranged from her family, and she craved the attention he gave her like it was air.
He gave you the love that you felt like you needed.
At that time, he did, absolutely.
And you were willing to trade.
Yes, we were willing to trade anything for that because I just wanted and needed to be loved.
It was an unfair trade. Eventually, this man took revealing pictures she had sent him by phone and posted them on an advertising website that was notorious for adult services, then forced her to have sex with men who responded to the ad. Yet in Tori's mind,
well, he's making me do this, but he's still my boyfriend. He still tells me he loves me.
While also threatening to expose what she was now doing to her family. By now, Tori was back on drugs, sometimes making $1,000 a night in Tampa Bay having sex with men.
Giving it all to him. So many times I'm like, I'm gonna leave, I'm doing it, and then I'd be dope sick and I'm like, I can't.
Tori's human trafficking story mirrors Brianna Cole's human trafficking story.
So I was always seeking like any sort of validation that I could.
As a teen, attention seeking led her to drugs, then addiction, then worse.
I learned about the time I was 18 that I could trade my body for substances.
Human traffickers then preyed on her vulnerabilities, offering attention she desperately hoped for, drugs she desperately wanted, and shelter she desperately needed.
He offered me a place to stay, you know, safety, the whole nine, which sounds good to someone who's experienced homelessness already.
In exchange for?
I had to work for him.
What got Tori and Brianna out, the traffickers got arrested. But what saved their lives, they'll tell you, was Sala Freedom. A Florida organization Lori Swink co-founded to support victims, stop human traffickers, and educate people about trafficking.
The reality is, anywhere there's internet, traffickers, pedophiles have an access to our children. And that's frightening.
Yes, it can be through popular social media apps, like in Tori's case on Instagram, but also video games with chat capabilities, or really anything that connects traffickers and victims, often kids, through technology.
It's accessible 24/7.
There's a lot of predators out there that know these apps, they know how to use these apps and navigate them.
Sergeant Tim McClintock supervises the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit at St. Pete Police. I asked him which apps traffickers troll. The truth, he says, it changes constantly.
You have these ones that pop up, they're here for a few months, here for a year or two. Kids find them. It's a given. Kids are going to find them.
He told me social media companies must report instances they spot of child pornography or possible predator behavior, but he wishes they did more than they're legally required to stop these human traffickers.
If you're asking, do I believe ethics should play a role? Absolutely. Does it always happen? No. Sometimes money speaks higher than ethics.
And as Tori will tell you, sometimes lives change in simple moments on a phone, like when a Romeo pimp took her desire for love and used it against her.
Make you think that you are just the only one that they want and that they would never do anything to hurt you.
Until he did. Jeff Butero, Spectrum News.
Joining us now to talk more about this, Beth Dujek, the outreach manager at the Monique Burr Foundation. This is some really serious stuff. How in the world do you educate children so that they know that some of the apps they can possibly access on their cell phone, it can be dangerous?
Absolutely. So we work primarily with schools, districts, all over to really provide primary prevention for children pre-K through 12th. We wholeheartedly believe it's an adult's responsibility to keep a child safe, but there are things kids can do to help us. And that way we're giving them the knowledge, the education, and the empowerment to know when something isn't right or to ask questions and defer to a safe adult in their life if they need help.
Educating young people, we get that. When it comes to parents being proactive, many of us, we don't understand these apps. We understand that talking to strangers, that type of interaction can be dangerous for our kids. But how do you educate parents so that they know that they can take some of that control by knowing what's on their kids' devices?
So we have tons of resources on our website. That's www.mbfpreventioneducation.org. Courses that they can take, things that they can do to learn how they can help keep their child safe. But really, you said it best, teaching them whoever they're talking to online, an online friend is always a stranger. I feel like you can't say that enough to a child. Giving them that common language to come to you and say, I've seen a red flag. You can't start too soon, where even with a 4-year-old playing a game on your phone and a pop-up, teaching them to come to you and say, Mom, Dad, look, this has happened and there's something on my screen. But then that 14-year-old comes to you and says, I made a mistake, I sent a picture, please help.
There are so many apps out there, but we also know something as simple as texting, inappropriate pictures, having conversations with people we don't know and giving them our address and personal information. Kids that are younger sometimes, right, they can be groomed into thinking this is somebody that they want to talk to, when in actuality it's somebody completely different.
Right. And having those conversations around what a red flag might be, truly grooming behavior. We're not saying that to kids, but we're saying what's a red flag. You know, somebody convincing you over time to do something that you knew wasn't a good idea. And that really evolves to thinking in terms of you know, the choices they make online. That first choice to send or post is theirs, but after that, it's no longer theirs. It can be shared again, can be forwarded, and then ultimately also giving them the messaging of hope. That if they have made a mistake, there's hope out there. There's things that you can do to report a picture that's gone online. National Center for Missing and Exploited Children can help have it taken down from different places.
How comfortable do parents need to get with the idea of, I'm paying for the cell phone in this service, I will be picking this phone up and looking at it from time to time, and having that access, letting their kids know, I'm going through your phone. Yes, I'm looking at what's here.
Yeah.
Some parents feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do, my child deserves some privacy.
Right. It's a tool. Ultimately, that's what it is. It's a tool, just like giving them a laptop, letting them borrow your car. It's a tool that they're using. And so, you know, the ownership is the parents, and kind of letting them know, hey, give them the refusal skills or the language to say to their parents, like, my mom and dad are strict and they check my phone from time to time. So that already sets up the boundaries for, don't send me something inappropriate, because not only will my mom find out, but your mom might find out too.
Do you think that young people understand that someone that's reaching out to talk to them on their cell phone or their tablet, through social media, through apps, sometimes they see a photo and that person looks like someone that's their age? Do you think that they realize that it can be someone that really is out to harm them?
Absolutely not. No way. And I have facilitated our programs in schools for years, and they're so literal, they can't even begin to understand why somebody would pretend to be somebody that's their same age, whether it's 11, 12. And that's why teaching them those tips and tricks to how they try to get you into a one-on-one conversation. They don't communicate just in the gaming platform. They're always trying to get your personal information and learn something about you, where you go to school, where you live, are you ever left home alone? All of those are red flag type of questions.
There was one really important statistic I wanted you to share with us, and that was about how some of the numbers have gone up since the COVID pandemic. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. We are seeing a huge shift in the online enticement of males. 93% of males are being enticed online. So when they no longer had the avenue to socialize with their friends, they turn to online avenues. And so what they will generally do is kind of weaponize them with shame. They usually go after them for money. Some kind of extortion happens, but they have immediate access to all their friends, family, peers, where they go to school. So kind of being on the lookout for that. And again, if something like that happens, having that resource in the safe adult, a parent to say, what do I do?
Beth, thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you for having me, Tammy.
Survivors of human trafficking often fight for years to escape cycles of abuse, but then they face new challenges.
Being in a group home, being abused is not normal. They is supposed to protect you. Some are good, some are bad, but at the end of the day, they're supposed to protect you.
What it takes for many of them to get their lives back. Justice for All, Out of the Shadows continues after the break. Thousands of sex trafficking victims wait through the long night, anxious for the light of hope to come. Many never find a way out, and those who do have their own set of new challenges to overcome. Once they escape or are rescued, there isn't always a place for them to go. Welcome back to Justice for All, Out of the Shadows. We talked to a former human trafficking task force member who says she had a hard time finding a place for children to go in Florida after being rescued. So she created her own foundation, providing a safe space for survivors. Justice for All, Sandra Weathers has her story.
For Aranaya Reed,
I am about to make a quiche, comforters, and grits.
Her kitchen is her safe space.
Cupcakes, that's what I love to do the most.
Here she is pictured with some of her decadent desserts. The 20-year-old makes cake pops, cupcakes, and everything else in between. Something she says gave her comfort when her life wasn't so sweet.
From 8 to 18, I was in foster care my whole life.
She says that's not the worst part of her story.
I knew it from when I was 8 years old. To me, it's a cycle. It's a never-ending cycle because I was touched inappropriately when I was younger.
That trauma mixed in with her abuse at different foster homes is what she calls a recipe for disaster. By the age of 14, she was under the influence of a sex trafficker.
At first, it was because I wanted to go and make fast money. I wanted to sell my body. Then it got to from I want to I have no choice, because now I got somebody over my head that's threatening to kill my life, kill my family if I don't want to make this amount of certain money to them.
Aranaya says she was still being trafficked at 15 when she lost her first child to the child welfare system. For years, she says she's lived a life most people only hear about in movies.
I realized I'm in something that I might can't get myself out of, that I might have to be killed by the hands of a man just to leave.
So this is one of the bedrooms.
Eventually, she ended up here.
They love the little teddy bears.
At Bridging Freedom.
They are little girls. They need little girl things. They love to color. They love to hold the teddy bear. They love their little movies. So everything, your child loves, the kids that come here love that as well.
It's a top secret state licensed safe house for child sex trafficking victims that Laura Hamilton says the state desperately needed.
It's hard to understand that this is really happening in our neighborhoods, that a child is lured in and then forced to provide sexual acts to buyers, unspeakable things that they're asked or forced to do, and upon their little bodies.
After working 4 years on sex trafficking task forces, Laura says opening this facility was her way of making a real impact. Now her facility helps girls ranging from ages 12 to 17 years old.
We need more safe homes. There is always a wait list. We are pretty much full year round.
At Bridging Freedom, their mission is to restore childhoods with therapy, education, and a sense of home.
The children that are in need of services here at Bridging Freedom come from 3 different areas. Either they're coming from the foster system, they get so frustrated with their circumstances they run. Another child might be from a family that's abusing them, selling them, even involving them in trafficking, and she may run.
Laura says, as scary as that sounds, one of the other dangers threatening girls who end up here is something very common.
You have to look at that phone. You have to make sure there are protections on that phone so that your child doesn't start developing a relationship with a stranger that they should not be. That is how simple it starts.
She says places like Bridging Freedom will be needed for the foreseeable future, with people like Aranaya who successfully completed the program serving as a reminder of how important and impactful this work is.
It made me realize we're not no victims. We're not victims. Yes, we was taken advantage of, but we survived. We came out on the top.
And she's determined to keep moving forward. Sandra Weathers, Spectrum News.
The fight for survivors to get their lives back on track can be as long or longer from the time they were trapped in the abuse cycle. But there are things that you can do to bring a glimmer of hope to even the darkest situation. It all starts with spotting the signs that someone is in trouble. Going to explain some of those signs next. Justice for All, Out of the Shadows continues after the break. We've covered training programs, recovery resources, and technology awareness, but how can we work to prevent human trafficking altogether? It all starts with spotting the signs that it's happening. The State Department has some tips to identify victims. Are they not allowed to speak to anyone else alone? Do they live with their employer or live in poor conditions? Does the employer or person that they're traveling with hold their identity documents? Are there signs of physical abuse? Are they submissive or fearful? If you think you've identified someone in a trafficking situation, alert law enforcement immediately. Don't try to rescue them yourself. That can be very dangerous for both you and the victim.
We don't ask them to try to discern the elements of a crime. We just want them to look at a situation and go, this isn't right, something's wrong here, and call local law enforcement.
Human trafficking awareness training is a new trend in the private sector. Florida requires hotel and lodging businesses to give their employees approved training. In Texas and Ohio, hairstylists and cosmetologists, they're required to take courses on spotting human trafficking in their clients. The Truckers Against Trafficking organization, they're working to put the brakes on trafficking. Training programs like this one at the Roadmaster Drivers School teach truckers about the red flags they could encounter on the roadways.
If a trucker's sitting in their truck and they see a Lincoln Navigator pull in and 10 girls get out, there's no reason why 10 girls are getting out of a Navigator in the middle of a truck stop, scantily clad, wearing clothing that is revealing. That's an indicator that they should call the 1-800 number.
It's a trend the transportation industry as a whole is following. This event at Port Tampa Bay is focused on raising awareness about precious cargo that shouldn't be there.
It's extremely important for all sectors in the maritime industry to be aware of human trafficking. It can be occurring in the cruise industry, but also fishing, cargo or shipping, really in any setting. So there are 4 main indicators of human trafficking. It's control, distress or injury, confusion, and behaviors that indicate sex buying.
Awareness campaigns also want to put the ball in your court. You may not have formal training, but you can still spot the signs that something may not be right. Start by noticing these signs. You may have seen them before. More and more of them are posted at airports, bus stations, restaurants, and bars, especially in bathrooms. If you, someone you know, or someone you see appears to be in a human trafficking situation, the National Human Trafficking Hotline is there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The number is on your screen, 888-373-7888. You can also chat the hotline on their website, humantraffickinghotline.org. Thank you so much for joining us on Justice for All, Out of the Shadows. I'm Tammy Fields. We'll see you again next time for another Justice for All. Stay safe, everyone, and stay informed.